imagine if I was like going to pound a pre-workout and then be like, I'm not going to go anymore. I'm going to watch TV. And then you're sitting watching TV and you're like hyped. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Talks, the podcast that brings you real strategies for sustainable fitness transformation. Today, we're going to be diving into pre-workout, and I want to start with a little bit of like a quick anecdote because I actually worked out this morning, and you know that I'm not a morning person. But I did have a good night's sleep, which was great, and I did have a little bit of espresso before I went to hit my workout, and it got me thinking.
Espresso yourself.
Espresso myself. I espressoed myself this morning to get through my workout. Not to get through my workout, just in preparation for my workout.
Enhance your workout experience.
Exactly. And it made me realize, like, I don't personally take a lot of pre-workout supplements. It's just not something part of my routine, but it is common for many people. And I want to ask you, Paris, like, are you currently taking pre-workout?
So I take a non-stim pre-workout, which essentially just helps with blood flow. And then I will usually stack that with like a caffeine pill, or I'll just have a coffee. So I'll say I take pre-workout 3 to 5 times a week, maybe, but like my own pre-workout, I don't take like a normal pre-workout concoction. It's more like I have pump product and then I'll stack with a caffeine pill, or I'll just have a coffee. So yeah, maybe like 3 to 4 times per week.
So you have your own kind of regimen around the pre-workout supplementation routine versus having like one designated branded pre-workout supplement that you take. Amazing. So because there's so much pre-workout on like out there in terms of product selection and messaging and social media promos and all that kind of stuff, we really want to dive into pre-workout today. And so the question we're going to be answering is, should you take pre-workout? Now this one, there's a lot to unpack here, and we're actually going to go a little heavy into the science today, which is one of our key brand pillars, right? Science, sustainability, success. Today, we're leaning heavy into the science side.
Yeah, but still trying to keep it simple.
Yes, we're simplifying. We're not going to go into some...
this and this, yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to do like a full-blown like research deep dive, but we are going to present the facts, I guess is the science part. We're presenting straight facts today.
I like it.
Amazing. So let's actually talk about what is pre-workout. And that sounds kind of basic, but I think let's actually just talk about what is commonly in there and why do people take it to begin with? What's the intention?
Yeah. Essentially, pre-workout is a supplement that you take, typically in a powdered form, but some do come in like pill form that you take.
Or even ready-made drinks, ready to drink too.
Or, ready to drink drinks that you take before your workout to essentially give you energy and enhance your performance. That's typically the claim. You take it pre-training to enhance your performance and give you energy.
I like you said that's the claim, right? Because that is the anticipated benefit and kind of the reason people do engage with pre-workout products, right? So when we talk about that claim of energy, most people think about caffeine, but caffeine isn't often the only supplement within a pre-workout drink or powder or any of that. So what are some of the other common ones that will be in there? Because if it was just caffeine, I would just be like, oh, I'll just go pound some coffee. But what else do people typically find in pre-workouts?
Yeah, so the most common ingredients that you will find would be things like caffeine, beta-alanine, citrulline or citrulline malate. And then, there's some other ones like you might find taurine, l-tyrosine, alpha-GPC, and creatine. Like those, if I had to say, those are the most common ones when you check the back of the label, like just kind of spitfiring them, those would be the main ones. But a lot of times, caffeine and beta-alanine are like probably two of the biggest ones that you'll see in there, and creatine. Yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to actually explain a little bit about how those common pre-workout ingredients connect back into the proposed claims and benefits, which were, as Paris laid out up front, improved energy and performance in the gym. So we're going to connect it back, and we're talking specifically today about gym training, so resistance training. Some of these have been studied with different applications around like endurance sports and things like that. Today, we're going to focus on the merits that they have for resistance training, bodybuilding style training, strength.
In my mind, when I think of it, it's like, yes, we told like generally, but I think it's almost like energy and performance, focus, so like cognition, and then pumps. Right?
Okay. So I like that.
Further down, yeah.
So the proposed benefits that we're going to kind of like filter through these ingredients are energy and performance, cognitive benefits. And then when you say pump, why do people chase the pump? Like, where does that fall into things? How is that different than what you see as performance related?
That's a good question. So more blood flow to the muscles, we're delivering more nutrients and more water. But also, there's potentially some minor performance benefits to having better blood flow. You could argue as well, and better kind of bringing blood and nutrients to the muscle. But I do think that just generally makes training more enjoyable when you have a pump, and also, it does help with mind muscle connection, in my opinion. If you have, let's say you have a crazy quad pump on your leg extensions, it's a lot easier to feel the muscle working and know what target muscle you're working versus if you have no pump. So subjectively or anecdotally as well, I find that personally, and I know a lot of clients do, when they have a pump, it's much easier to focus on the muscle that you're training.
That makes sense. Okay, great. So those are the 3 proposed benefits we're going to break down. Let's go through each one and then talk about how it relates to the different ingredients that are commonly found. And also, is it worth taking pre-workout? Should you be taking pre-workout for that benefit?
Yeah. So I think from the energy performance standpoint, the main ingredient that people think about, of course, is going to be caffeine. All right. I will say caffeine is probably one of the most researched compounds in all of exercise science in terms of being a performance aid in many different sports, many different exercise types as well. I would say there is some decent evidence to show performance benefits. Interestingly enough, the dosing is pretty high, though, in the studies that do show effectiveness.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, I believe it's 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. And if you do the math on that, that's a pretty significant dose.
Yes. So, for a 70 kilogram person, that's 200 to 400 milligrams of caffeine. And just to put that into context, 1 cup of coffee is kind of anywhere from like 90 to 110 milligrams. So let's say like 100.
Yeah, unless it's Starbucks, then it'd be.
Unless it's Starbucks. Yeah, Starbucks, for some reason, their caffeine is like through the roof.
Yeah,
let's say an average cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So you're thinking now for a 70 kilogram person, what's that, about 160 pounds?
Yeah, 70 times 2.2, right? So 70 times 2.2 is 154.
150. Yeah, so for a 150 pound person, you're essentially, the effective dose of caffeine is between 2 to 4 cups of coffee.
Yeah, which is quite a bit. Now, let's also keep in mind, everybody is different in their ability to metabolize caffeine, also how caffeine affects them. Right? Some people get like super jittery, some people don't. I've even had clients where he said he took 2 scoops of a pretty strong pre-workout and he didn't feel anything at all. So, and multiple times. So we have people on one end of the spectrum where they take 50 milligrams of caffeine in a tea and they're like buzzing. And then other people will take like a significant dose, maybe 400 or 500 milligrams, and they're like, nothing. But coming back to the science, so that's the dose that kind of seems to be efficacious or effective in promoting performance. This, in a pre-workout, I'm just going to straight up say it, like, this is probably what would give you the most amount of benefit there. Okay, it would be actually the caffeine. It does also just make training more enjoyable as well. I would say it's a good mood enhancer as well. And maybe your perceived exertion, so how hard you feel training is, can also be reduced by caffeine. There's quite a few mechanisms in which caffeine works, but let's just say, to keep it basic, we'll say that. So yeah, that would be like the first ingredient for energy.
I really do like that we started with caffeine, because like you said, it's kind of the thing that people think of when they think of pre-workout. But I also think it is really important to break it down and actually understand, okay, is it doing what we think it's doing? And the short answer is yes. But then also, in what dosage? In what dosage is it actually doing what we anticipate it doing? And I love that you outlined how it can be so variable by person, because there's like the genetic component to caffeine tolerance. There's just the tolerance that you build up by being, a regular caffeine user. And then there's also body weight. So we talked about effective doses based on your body weight. So I just want to provide a little bit of context, because as somebody who is like a relatively smaller person, I'm probably about like, I kind of, let's say between 50 to 55 kgs, right? So if we think about an effective amount of, caffeine for me pre-workout, so we said 3 to 6 milligrams per kg, right? So if I do the math, it's about 150 milligrams of caffeine to 300 milligrams of caffeine. Now, the thing that I often think about is like, I'll pick up a pre-workout supplement and it's got 300 to 400 milligrams of caffeine per serving. And I go, whoa, that's actually on the high end for me. And most of that is also because I love drinking coffee. So I'm usually pairing that with coffee. So it becomes really, really easy for you to exceed kind of your caffeine thresholds or recommendations over the course of a day if you start regularly using pre-workout and you're somebody who also likes to drink coffee, or you're somebody who has a smaller body composition.
Right. And I'm totally fine spending a bit more time on caffeine, because I think it's the one that is important to talk about. It's funny because people, you got to think about it. if you have typically a coffee drinker, right, and then you're also having pre-workout, you got to remember that that is both contributing to your daily intake.
Mm-hmm.
And the side effects can be a little bit more anxiety, a little bit more kind of nervousness type feeling, sleep disruption, which we're going to talk about kind of later. So just kind of thinking about those types of things. And remember, caffeine is also technically pretty addictive. So withdrawal symptoms, if you don't have it, like some people will go a day without their coffee, they have major headaches and things like that. So it's just some things to think about in terms of that. But I will say, in terms of exercise performance, even habitual intake doesn't seem to affect the performance benefits in exercise. So if you're it's like, okay, well, if I take 200 milligrams of caffeine before training, like by week 3, is it still going to have the same effect? It seems to be yes, interestingly enough. So you don't have to worry. If you habitually consume caffeine, it's not going to impact your ability to still get some performance aid during your workouts.
Right. So you're not going to kind of like build up a tolerance that somehow makes it less effective because you've just been using it for so long.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. So if we were to summarize like kind of caffeine, first and foremost, is it effective?
I would say I would be inclined to say yes.
Yes. And for which purpose? We have 3 claimed benefits, right? We're talking about energy and performance, cognitive function, and pumps. So when we're talking about caffeine effectiveness, you said, yes, it's effective. Let's connect it back to those 3 claimed benefits of taking pre-workout.
I'm going to say mostly under the bracket of energy and performance with a little bit of cognition sprinkled in there as well.
Yeah, because there's the alertness that comes with it and mental focus that also does have an impact on performance. So that's caffeine in a nutshell. Like you said, there's a lot we could talk about in terms of caffeine. But if you are somebody who's looking to take pre-workout for the caffeine component specifically, yes, it is effective, but just be mindful of some of those things we outlined around your own dosaging and what's actually effective dosaging for exercise performance benefits.
Yeah. So continuing down the ingredient list now, let's talk about creatine, because this is in some pre-workouts, but I will tell you why I actually don't buy pre-workouts that have creatine in it. Because the dose maybe is like 1 to 2 grams, okay? And we know the effective dose for creatine is somewhere around 3 to 5 grams, and some studies recently showing even higher dosages. But I just take it separate on the side because creatine doesn't have an acute effect. People are like, oh, I'm going to take my creatine, my pre-workout, will give me extra energy. It's like, that's not how creatine works, okay? Well, maybe we'll do a whole other podcast on creatine exclusively, but it doesn't have an acute benefit, which means you don't take it and something happens. Like caffeine, you take it, it clicks in, whatever. Creatine is something that gets saturated within your muscle cells, and once it's saturated, then it has a performance benefit. So having it in the pre-workout is kind of irrelevant unless you're counting that as part of your dose for the day, but then why not just keep it simple and just, whoops, hit my mic. Why not just keep it simple and just have it like at another time of day?
It makes way more sense to just have it as like a separate daily supplement. Because like you said, also because it's saturated in the muscle, the point is to kind of take it daily. I love that you use the word irrelevant, because when it comes to the purpose of a pre-workout, as pre-workout and that short window and that immediate effect, it is irrelevant.
Yeah. However, as a supplement to increase performance, technically is effective. Yeah. So on the side, not as a pre-workout, but I would say I'm most comfortable recommending 2 supplements to clients: caffeine and creatine. Creatine taken 3 to 5 grams a day every single day. Doesn't matter when you take it. Caffeine pre-training, you find the dose that works best for you based on all the things.
So when it comes to creatine, short version is yes, take it. It does help with performance in the gym. However, do not link it with pre-workout supplementation. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Shall we dive into the next ingredient?
Let's do it.
Okay. Which one do you want to do next?
Let's go beta-alanine, because we just want to group the most like
common ones.
Common ones, yeah.
Let's talk about beta-alanine. What does the beta-alanine actually really do, and why do lifters seek it out in pre-workout?
Essentially, the theory is it's going to buffer the acidity that builds up in the muscle during exercise, which, long story short, should theoretically help improve endurance during exercise bouts. So that's a proposed benefit. However, we also got to remember what kind of exercise we're doing. And coming back to weight training, that is essentially short, quick bursts of very intense exercise. And the studies that do show benefits of beta-alanine are not really in weight training. They're in more longer duration type intense exercise, for example, like 800-meter runs or something like that.
Yeah,
or like, 400, if you're a CrossFit athlete or something like that.
400 to 15-meter running and 100 to 400-meter swimming were some of the studies were done on those exercise modalities to prove the benefits of beta-alanine. So they are more endurance-based. They're not like the 3-hour marathons or half marathons, but they are more endurance-based or aerobic exercise
yeah,
compared to resistance training.
Exactly. So a lot of people like it because that's the one that gives you the tingles. So people are like, "Oh, my pre-workout's doing something."
I'm hyped up.
It essentially just promotes blood flow around like the skin, which is why people think like, "Oh, something's doing something."
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not as inclined to recommend beta-alanine supplementation for lifters. To be completely honest, I'm just going to be honest with you guys as always.
So when we think about the main kind of proposed benefits of pre-workouts, I'm going to say them one more time. And I'm actually going to say them a few more times. Energy and performance, number 1. Number 2, cognitive function. And number 3, pump. So theoretically, the proposed benefit of beta-alanine, if we're talking about endurance, would be more on that, exercise performance side of things, energy and performance, that first bucket. But what you're saying is for the purpose of resistance training, and specifically the style where we're doing, which is shorter sets, not very endurance based, it doesn't really have any benefit.
No, I don't. I wouldn't be. I don't think there's enough strength in the data that we would make a recommendation for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great. I think we just shut the door on beta-alanine.
Sorry, beta.
If you love the tingly feeling, that's up to you, if that's worth it for you. But when it comes to the actual physiological benefits, they have not yet been proven to be there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to quickly kind of fly through the more focused cognition ones because these ones, if you think about it, it's a little bit trickier to prove like a very strong effect size of these types of things. But I can tell you anecdotally and from some research, like the main ones that might prove a benefit, especially under stress or under fatigue situations. Definitely caffeine still as a cognitive enhancing effect. I like to actually stack caffeine with l-theanine, which is essentially just smooths out the effect of caffeine. So if you're somebody that gets jittery from caffeine, try l-theanine. It's commonly taken in high doses for people that have anxiety or even like social anxiety or something like that. But I think it like almost streamlines caffeine and makes it a little bit more focused instead of like jittery.
That's where we talked previously about like how caffeine does have some, cognitive function benefits as well with alertness and stuff. So you're saying when it's paired with l-theanine in pre-workout supplements, it can help specifically maybe channel the caffeine's effects towards more that cognitive function, not just the high energy stuff.
Yeah, I think it just kind of removes the jitteriness of caffeine. That's the best way I can amplify. It's also found in things like green tea, and I do think it amplifies focus as well. But yeah, anecdotally, it just smooths out caffeine essentially, which can be really cool. And in terms of dosing, I say usually like either half of the dose of the caffeine. So if you took 200 milligrams of caffeine, maybe do 100 milligrams of L-theanine. I personally like doing 1-to-1. So if I did 200, then also 200 L-theanine. So that's the first kind of pairing I'll say in one. And then the ones that kind of have like some benefit that I would say, okay, maybe I might slightly recommend would be alpha-GPC, which has some benefits performance, but I do think it helps you kind of click in mentally. And then also l-tyrosine is another one that can like under fatigue situations potentially give it a little bit more boost. So there's a few kind of under this, but those are some like more common ones you might see in pre-workouts. I'm not going to say like these are game changers. You might see them at the back, but I don't have any like real deep knowledge of these intricate pathways and different things. I'll just be straight up. That's not what I specialize in, getting people in kick-ass shape, not necessarily like super into biochemistry as I might have been earlier in life.
Okay. Alpha-GPC, l-tyrosine, usually found on the label with the intention of helping cognitive function. Kind of like, what would you give that as like a rating?
10 being like amazing, 1 being like shitty. I might say 5 potentially.
So kind of neutral.
Yeah. But I just wanted to throw it in there. And again, like dosing, like they're still doing a lot of research on like the dosing and everything. And again, I don't have deep knowledge about, the individual studies on these, but I feel comfortable making a somewhat neutral, maybe slight positive recommendation for these types of things if you look at the correct dosing.
So it depends on dosaging, also not highly researched. So it's still a little bit in that gray zone of like, you can take it if you want to, but don't hang your hat on it. Mm-hmm. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, amazing. So then in terms of ingredients now, I think the one area we haven't really talked about yet is the pump as a proposed benefit. And I think this is one thing that lifters might understand when they see the difference between stim and non-stim pre-workouts, which you alluded to earlier. Stim workouts being trying to really tap into that primary benefit people are seeking with caffeine and energy for workout. I think pre-workout and energy kind of go hand in hand. However, there is a whole category of pre-workout supplements that are caffeine free. And some people might be like, what? Isn't the whole point of taking pre-workout for energy? But there is this other claimed benefit around pump, right? Which is blood flow to the muscle, as you talked about earlier. Let's unpack that and why there are non-stim based pre-workouts on the market to support that claim.
I think, as I mentioned before, it does help with mind-muscle connection. It could also, better blood flow, theoretically bring more nutrients and potentially clear waste better. But also, it makes you feel good in the gym too when you look at yourself in the mirror. It's fine to get hyped up if you get a good delt pump or glute pump or whatever, and you're like, you know what, this pump is awesome. Like, check it out. Like it's okay to get motivated by seeing yourself. It's not narcissistic. Like, you work hard, and it's okay to be like, you know what, I'm enjoying this pump right now. You know what I mean? It does make training more enjoyable. So in terms of, I would say it's funny because like a lot of when these pre-workout like pump products came in at the beginning, a lot of them were recommending like l-arginine and like agmatine sulfate were like the big ones, but I think those are not really shown to do as effectiveness at the job. It's funny because I actually did a seminar on this in university comparing kind of arginine and citrulline. I can't remember the dirty details, but yeah, I remember. So I went deep into it for that purpose. But essentially, pump products are supposed to increase nitric oxide in your blood, which is a vasodilator, which means it dilates your blood vessels or opens up your blood vessels.
Which is where the blood flow benefit comes to play.
Yes. So, essentially, right. It makes sense, right? You have more nitric oxide, dilates the blood vessels, make them bigger, better blood flow. Okay, makes sense. But things like arginine, the mechanism maybe theoretically doesn't even really like support the claim, essentially. Like arginine and agmatine sulfate, I think aren't actually that great pump products in my personal opinion. Again, I'm not a specialist in this kind of thing, but I would be more comfortable recommending things like L-citrulline, which is a compound actually found in, I think, watermelon. Of course,
So wait, are you telling me that I could just eat a bunch of watermelon and then go hit the gym and have an awesome pump?
I don't think you're going to find the right dose.
Right. The minimum effective dose is not going to be in that quantity of watermelon that I'm physically capable of eating.
Exactly. The dosing for that is usually like 6 to 8 grams is usually like a good dose. So for
I just want to clarify, 6 to 8 grams of citrulline, not of watermelon.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also some research into like beetroot extract and nitrates and stuff like that, which I don't have too much of a deep dive in that.
It's new research.
And it's newer,
it's new research.
Speaking. So, and it's kind of hard to prove. And even if it did work, like the doses would have to be high, it would be expensive, et cetera, et cetera. So I think practically speaking, L-citrulline, probably the best to go for. Glycerol is pretty interesting as well. It really pulls a lot of water in, which can really kind of bully up. But
like it makes your muscles look and feel bigger, right?
Essentially, 100%. So you might find glycerol in there, but I would say L-citrulline, 6 to 8 grams is probably a good one. Interestingly enough, it's also some research in terms of better blood flow in all aspects for guys that might struggle with certain issues below the belt. They do have some research kind of using L-citrulline and also just promoting better circulation overall. So just so you know.
So if we're talking about, I'm going to keep going back to like our 3 proposed benefits or our 3 proposed claims when we're talking specifically about workouts and lifting in the gym. The third and last one was the pump, right? And so of all of the proposed ingredients or the various ingredients you might encounter in a pre-workout supplement, the one that is going to be most effective for delivering on the pump is L-citrulline in a 6 to 8 gram dosage. So that's one thing too I find with a lot of pre-workouts on the market. They'll have L-citrulline and I'll be like, oh great, there's citrulline in here. But then I'll look at the dosing and it's like 1 to 2 grams. I'm like, okay, it can be easy for them to kind of trick you a little bit as well, because just because it's in there doesn't mean it's actually providing the benefit. I think that's one of the ingredients where I see that very often.
Yeah, it's like 1 to 3 grams, and then it'll have like 300 milligrams of caffeine, and then it'll have like a gram of creatine and some beta-alanine. You're like,
you could have just had 2 cups of coffee and called it a day and it would be the same effect.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Which is hence why I like buying a pump product on the side and then stack it with a caffeine dose that works for me. That's why I do that.
And I think, that is the smart way of doing it, because then if you're thinking about how do I get all 3 of these proposed benefits, it's very hard to find something on the market that has the right ingredients for each of those benefits in the right dosing for you.
Mm-hmm. For you specifically.
For you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because, as much as I wish that there was like this personalized supplement company that can build me my ideal Courtney's pre-workout, that doesn't exist, right?
That's the next business.
Maybe, next business idea for sure.
No.
Okay. So we essentially just walked you guys through the 3 main proposed benefits of pre-workout supplements and the ingredients that are commonly found that are meant to deliver on each, as well as whether or not they actually do the job. Paris, can you give us a very, very quick summary of what we just went through so that then we can start talking about, do you actually need to be taking it?
Yeah. So essentially, proposed benefits: energy and performance, cognitive enhancement, and then also pumps. And we said most of the pre-workouts are underdosed and have ingredients that don't really do much for the context that we're talking. But we are comfortable recommending caffeine for energy, performance, and a bit of cognition, and then L-citrulline for better pumps. The cognition stuff, I personally do find a benefit anecdotally, but I can't say necessarily like there's super amazing evidence. I'm just going to say slightly skewed towards positive, maybe closer to neutral though for those ones. And yeah, most pre-workouts are, as we said, either underdosing the ones that work or have stuff that doesn't matter.
Hopefully this helps you guys kind of cut through the noise and just be like, is this really what I'm getting from the pre-workout supplement I'm looking at? Is it in the dose that is going to be effective? And if not, you might not need to take that supplement. Speaking of which, should you be taking pre-workout, which is today's question. So based on the background of what's currently found in pre-workout supplements and whether it actually does the job or not, if we had to give a short answer, should you take pre-workout supplement? What would your short answer be? And then we'll unpack it.
I'm going to say, I can't say yes or no. I'm just going to say maybe, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to say you can on some of your sessions. That's going to be my recommendation.
That's interesting because I actually thought you were going to say no, only because I framed the question as should you, right? So I think in my mind, I don't think there's a necessity behind taking a pre-workout supplement, but there could be some marginal benefit.
So if you said, do you need to take a pre-workout? I would say definitely not.
Right. I think this is the gray zone that we often play in, right? It's definitely not a necessity and is not something that should be foundational, but it can make a small difference in the right context.
Yeah. And let me say something. I've had amazing workouts with zero pre-workout, and I've had really crappy workouts with pre-workout. And I will say though, if you at the very end of a fat loss phase or doing competition prep, I do think that the right pre-workout can actually make a difference. In that state, I have found a difference. Just getting any sort of stimulation when you're deep into diet can be helpful. But again, most of the benefit is coming from the caffeine, anyways. Placebo, which is something we're going to touch on here,
yes,
is strong.
So let's just dive. Like you're already on the track we're going towards, anyway. So let's talk about when does it make sense to take pre-workout? And you said, deep into a fat loss phase, or if you're a competition prep or something like that, where you like energy availability is very low. Mm-hmm. That was one case where you talked about.
Yeah. I also think if you're doing fasted training, I do think caffeine can definitely help. So pre-workout could help.
That was me this morning, taking my espresso before my morning workout, because I actually did train fasted this morning.
And you know what? I also did train, but I can't lie, I did have a few Jolly Ranchers intra-workout, and I had these little applesauce, this one applesauce pouch that mom gave me. So Yum. It wasn't completely fasted. It was
fair enough. But you still got the caffeine benefits too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think early morning sessions, I kind of just alluded to with my morning session this morning. Early morning sessions, you might have some benefit of taking pre-workout, especially if you don't have like caffeine in your system, if you haven't had a coffee yet, or if you're just somebody who's slower to wake up and you just need that mental alertness and that physical energy. Early morning sessions could be a time where you see some benefit of taking pre-workout. The other one you mentioned about energy availability, just like when energy is already low, that can be a benefit. But I also want to throw out another one in terms of when it's helpful. And I think this is the placebo effect you just talked about. If you are somebody who's like struggling with workout adherence, meaning you just are not getting yourself to the gym at the cadence or frequency that you want to, I think having a little bit of a pre-workout ritual can really help, like get you in the zone. And for a lot of people, that's what a pre-workout does. Because it kind of says, it mentally transitions you into the state of like, I'm having my pre-workout, therefore I'm going to the gym. It's just like, it's almost like that trigger of making the workout happen. And it also becomes a form of pre-commitment where you're like, well, imagine if I was like going to pound a pre-workout and then be like, I'm not going to go anymore. I'm going to watch TV. And then you're sitting watching TV and you're like hyped, right? So it's also a way that you can kind of pre-commit to like, okay, using the effects, if you're taking an effective pre-workout, using the effects for a good cause.
Yeah, and here's the thing as well. Like placebo is probably has a stronger effect shown in research compared to all the other things we just mentioned. So even if it just gives you the placebo of I'm going to go crush my session, it's actually worth it.
Yeah. It's
So
called the placebo effect for a reason. There is still an effect.
yeah. So just something to think about. But we do want to give a couple watch outs, as we said, like with the dosing, right? That's the main thing, like most underdosed. That's why you can kind of make your own concoction at home. Some just say proprietary blend on the back, and they don't even tell you how much of each dose of the compounds, or they don't even
But
tell
they
you
don't
what
tell you the
compounds
compounds.
are even in
Like
it. So you know what
if
you're
the, if
taking.
I think the proprietary blend one is probably one of the biggest watchouts when it comes to
Yeah,
pre-workouts. So if we go back to our question of like, should you take pre-workout? It's not should you take pre-workout period. You also have to be mindful of what pre-workouts are you taking.
mm-hmm.
And if you are taking ones that don't have the right dosaging, could just be kind of a waste of money because you're not getting the perceived effectiveness, unless that effectiveness is the placebo effect. And then the proprietary blend one, if you don't know what's in it,
Yeah.
like, okay, how can you actually gauge if it's going to be effective for you?
Yeah, and then if you're in the U.S. specifically, there's not a lot of restriction on supplements, kind of like the Wild Wild West. So there's even been traces of like even banned substances in some of those, or even like these. I will say borderline methamphetamine type compounds in some of these pre workouts. Like if people remember Jack 3D, it had 1,3-dimeth, which was that's like a pretty intense stimulant. So it's like if you don't know and you're like, oh, I'm new to lifting. I heard I should get a pre-workout, and then you go pick up one of these. Again, some of these are actually banned, but they kind of circulate back in somehow. You might be taking like something you're like, I haven't slept at all last night.
Yeah, and I think like ephedrine is one of the other ones, right? Like that was a big stimulant, kind of like caffeine-like properties, but has since become like a banned substance, but is still often kind of like, historically or legacy was involved in pre-workouts.
Yeah, so just all things to think about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the watchouts that we talked about were dosing, proprietary blends, and also potentially banned substances. We've given you a little bit of a sense of when it makes sense to take a pre-workout and what you should watch out for if you are going to decide to take one. I do want to touch on, though, like when maybe you shouldn't consider taking a pre-workout, because we've said this from the beginning of this episode. There's a lot of gray zone here, and there's two sides to every coin. Taking a pre-workout isn't just about, is it giving me the benefits that I'm seeking pre-workout? You have to zoom out and look at the bigger picture and say, is it actually potentially hindering my effectiveness in other ways? And the number one thing I think to consider is the effect it has on your sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So especially for people who do their lifts in the evening, let's say after work timing, this is something you want to be incredibly mindful of. At the end of the day, if we think about the main thing that we're seeking from pre-workouts is usually the energy. Let's say you've had a super long work day and you're like, I just need energy to get through this. So I'm going to pound my pre-workout. It's going to give me caffeine. Well, not to get into more of the science behind caffeine, but the half-life is about 5 hours. So 5 hours later in your system, half of the dosage of that caffeine is still there working through your system. Why that's important is if you work out at 6 p.m., 5 hours later, it's 11 p.m. and you're trying to get to bed and you've got half that caffeine keeping you buzzing. Yes. Now there's a very detrimental effect on sleep. Yes.
And even then, even if you do fall asleep, you have less REM sleep. So even you're like, oh, I'm the type of person I can drink coffee and go to bed. Yeah, but the depth of your sleep is still affected because it's central nervous system stimulant. That's what caffeine is. And then a lot of people get into this vicious cycle of like, I had a crappy night's sleep, so let me take more pre-workout. And then they have a crappy night's sleep. And then it's like this vicious cycle of poor sleep, more pre-workout. So just kind of getting lost in that. But I will say, everything we talked about right now doesn't even freaking matter unless you have your basic big rocks in your fitness journey in a row, like sleep, nutrition, training programming, like knowing how to organize those things and taking care of those things, your lifestyle habits, stress, sleep, like recovery, all those big rocks, those things matter so much more than nothing else we're talking about matters until you have those. So if you're looking at what pre-workout to take, but you don't even like hit your protein or don't even have a training program, like you're focusing on completely the wrong things. And, I will say this, I'm biased because I'm a coach, but people will spend hundreds of dollars a month on supplements that don't work, and they never even had a coach before. And it boggles my mind.
if we're talking about the hierarchy of priorities for effective lifting and progress on your fitness journey, this is so far down the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
So far down the hierarchy. So I think that's really important context. And you did talk about like how if you don't have those other things in check, it's irrelevant. I totally agree. We're bringing you this conversation to show you that there is nuance to these topics. And yes, they have a place in your fitness journey, but the goal is really to help you decide what place they should have. Like you said, if you don't have nutrition and sleep and an effective lifting program, like if you're going to the gym and doing a program that literally is so ineffective, or you're not lifting with good technique or any of that, but you took a pre-workout, who cares? Who cares if you took that pre-workout, right? If you're not lifting properly with good form, if you're not progressing in the gym, if you're not, hitting effective volume, or, your exercise selection is all over the place, or you're changing it up every week, pre-workout then means nothing for your long-term success. So I think the main thing with pre-workout is like, pre-workout has an acute effect. That's what you talked about. It's a thing you do immediately before you go to the gym. But just in the same way that like no single session is going to make or break your fitness journey in the gym. So if all you're doing is focusing on what are you doing in that immediate session and how do you get the most out of that one session, yes, that mindset is effective to get you through that session. But you have to bring that to light with the bigger picture of what are you doing on a macro level? What programming are you running? How are you setting those nutritional variables in place? Are you getting enough sleep? Because no pre-workout is going to be a band-aid solution for a bad lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. You've heard that common saying, what you do in the 23 hours outside the gym matters just as much as what you do in the 1 hour. So just kind of reminding yourself of that. And again, we're not claiming to be any sort of experts in biochemistry or supplements or anything like that. So this is just kind of a mixture of anecdote and what we've seen and the research that we've seen and what we've learned. But we will give an unbiased resource for people. If you want to search up any supplement, go to, maybe we'll even link it in the comments, maybe. Go to examine.com and you can search anything. And it's not sponsored website in terms of supplement companies. Like if you search an article on anything, it's usually sponsored by a supplement company. They have their own biases. This is unbiased, very science focused. It'll tell you kind of the proposed benefits and the efficacy, which just means how effective it actually is at doing what it's claimed.
And for different types of claims in different kinds of contexts, which is one of the things I really love about examine.com. Like they break it down, like for this purpose, they give it an evaluation. For this purpose, they give it an evaluation. So it's not like this is good, this is bad. Like it's very highly nuanced. We often rely on resources like examine.com to inform ourselves and stay up to date on new and emerging research. So definitely please go check it out if you want to dive deeper into any of the ingredients or any other supplement ingredients that you're interested in. So we're going to wrap things up. As a leave behind, I want to give people a sense of what are some great alternatives for pre-workout effectiveness. So if you're somebody who's like, I'm not sure I need a pre-workout, or maybe I'll use it sometimes, not other times, like what are some great things you should keep in mind when it comes to pre-workout effectiveness that is not a pre-workout supplement?
A good night's sleep, as we say, good water, especially if you're training in the morning. The biggest, most important thing you can do is chug some water. I also do find a big difference with sodium, having a little bit of salt pre-training. Don't forget, salt is important for muscle contraction. Sodium is important for muscle contraction as well as for your nervous system. It also does help with muscle hydration as well. So I'm big on those. And then carbohydrates. So if we're looking at variables that are going to impact your performance, total carbohydrate intake, including pre-workout carbohydrate intake, and then good night's sleep, good amount of water, a little bit of salt, Bob's your uncle.
Can I add one more? The right playlist. I don't know about you guys, but like you can get hype off of whatever pre-workout you're drinking, but you can also get super hype off like just picking the right music. There's a psychology behind that too. Let's not forget it.
There is research both showing music enhancing performance as well as somebody like encouraging, like verbal encouragement.
Right. Yeah. So if you have a friend who tells you straight up like it is and pushes you, bring that friend. They will be probably more beneficial than your pre-workout supplement.
%.
Yeah.
And with that,
okay.
Or listen to our podcast before the workout. No.
Yeah. Or listen to this. Yeah. Remember, guys, supplements are supplemental, right? They are playing a supporting role. Do not assume that they are going to make all of the difference. However, if you choose to engage with a pre-workout supplement, hopefully this episode gave you some things to think about, to look out for, and to shape your choices accordingly, because not all pre-workouts are created equal. So hopefully this gives you some direction on what to look for and how to pick the one that works best for you. All right, everybody. So without further ado, I think we will leave you for this week. Have an amazing week ahead, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can catch every episode of Truth Talks in your feeds every Monday. Bye for now.
Take care.